So you educate the front line, but you don't educate the people who are supposed to be helping them and training them and being a resource for them. It's almost wasted money. In a lot of cases, it is wasted money because I know the way that I train is about building relationships and doing all this stuff. Okay, well, if they're not going to be able to get support for that, the company just spent a whole bunch of money that they're going to get no return from because the salesperson is not going to be allowed to conduct themselves in that way.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. Now, that was Diane Helbig. Diane's a business advisor, podcast host, and author of the book titled Succeed Without Selling. The more you think about selling, the less you will sell. And in today's conversation, Diane and I talk about her book and dig into her premise that the more you think about selling, the less you actually will sell, which, when you think about it, makes some sense. So we dive into what it actually means to sell. And Diane and I are certainly on the same page when she says that selling is not about persuading, convincing, or cajoling a buyer into taking action. Diane believes that the ABCs of sales have changed, and it's certainly not about always be closing. So we explore some of the key ways she believes that sales has changed or needs to change, including that selling needs to be fun. We don't talk about that often enough, and amen to that. Selling needs to be fun, especially if you want to make a career of it. We also explore why sellers need to become more choosy, more selective about who they sell to. Diane writes about this in her book, and being selective about who you sell to can have an amazing impact on your productivity and the outcomes you achieve. So we'll get into all of this and much, much more, but before we get to Diane, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you subscribe, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could leave us a review. All right, let's jump into it with Diane. Diane, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Andy.
So we have a bit of a history about this. We started recording this. People don't know we started recording this, and then you were hit by like the storm of a lifetime or something, and your power went out. And so here we are again, trying for time, round two.
Right. Well, clear skies, and it's cooler here today, so.
All right. So no threat to the power grid. Perfect. Yeah.
Exactly.
Clear sailing here as well. So we're good.
Excellent.
Oh, good. Well, we're going to talk about your book, book titled Succeed Without Selling. I should put more emphasis on that. Succeed Without Selling. The more you think about selling, the less you will sell. So, obviously, a very intriguing title. Before we dive into that, so what was the driving force behind the book?
So the driving force was that I was watching way too many small business owners and salespeople sell in the traditional sense of the word and not get results that they were looking for because selling doesn't work. People don't like to be sold. They don't like salespeople. So I thought, you know what? I got to write a book and share what people should be doing, how they should be approaching other people in a way that actually gets results. Okay.
I like it so far. And yeah, the lessons in the book extend beyond just small business entrepreneurs and so on. And it's sort of universal lessons. So you sort of took us through that. So what does selling really mean, right? I mean, let's start with definition of terms, because if I ask a group of people I'm speaking to, which I've done in the past, what is selling? It comes up with some combination of the answer. Well, it's about persuading the buyer to buy our product, or something sort of like that. Which it's not the way I look at it, but I'm curious how you look at it.
So I don't look at it that way either. The way I look at it is that selling is about matching a solution to a problem. And so it's really about building relationships. And so that when the buyer needs what you have to sell, that you're the one they go to because they trust you, because you've built the relationship, because you weren't trying to convince them. I think traditionally, and I'm not surprised that a group of people would say about persuasion, I can't tell you how many times I've had someone say to me, okay, but if I could just convince them that they need, that this is the best thing since sliced bread. It's like, okay, but you can't, and you don't want to, because then you're talking them into something. And that's not what it is. That's where buyer's remorse comes from.
Well, yeah, I think even before that, I mean, you write in the book, right? You can't persuade, convince, or cajole people, but that's how we socialize sellers, right? That's how we train sellers. This is the
Yes, it
perspective we give
is.
them. This is your job, as if this
Right.
is the persona you have to assume.
Right.
And I had a guest on a show last year named Jonah Berger, who's written a book called The Catalyst. He's a professor at Wharton, and it's about persuasion, if you will. And a good book, and not that we necessarily agreed on everything, but he cites research in there that says that humans almost universally resist being persuaded. That when they feel like someone's trying to persuade them to do something, he called it persuasion reactance, but the defenses go up. It's just natural, right? We feel somebody's trying to persuade us to do something, we just put our guard up.
Right.
And so if that's your MO that you're going, leading into the conversation with, then you're off to kind of a rough start.
Exactly. It's exactly right. You're not getting what you're shooting for, right? Because they're going in the other direction. So,
but yet, again, to my point before, that's how we train people. And this is, I've been thinking about this and writing about this recently, is that, and other people talk about, cringeworthy behaviors that sellers adopt and so on. And I like to lump them under the category of being salesy, right? As no customer in the world has ever asked a seller to be more salesy, right? So we train sellers generally in behaviors that the buyers find no value in. And
right.
so how do we change that, right? It's on more, I know it's great, you're writing books and I'm writing books and I know lots of people are talking about this, but this idea of how we approach people in this sort of sales behavior, this is not innate human behavior. This is learned behavior. And so it's like, well, so I guess the first challenge is just how do we get people just to act like themselves?
Well, I think it starts with the trainers and the sales managers, or the bosses have to realize that what supposedly worked 40 years ago does not work now. I mean,
well, it didn't work then either. Just
I
FYI.
know.
Just FYI, it didn't work then either. Yes.
I know it didn't, but there were people who supposedly were successful with it, and so they would get promoted to sales manager, and then they would go and force people to behave in ways that didn't, wasn't comfortable and didn't work, and everyone would sit around and go, okay, well, that guy's just not a good salesman. It's like, no, you're teaching them something that is ineffective. So I think everyone has to realize that, if you want to believe that worked in the past, go ahead, but it doesn't work now. And the world has changed. And what the buyer wants is to be able to trust the person they're going to be buying from. They want a relationship with them. They want to be able to trust them. And to your point about this resistance, they're not going to trust someone who's trying to convince them of something. So it's a mindset shift. I mean, it's a paradigm shift. People are going to have to change their thought process so they can change their behavior.
Yeah, well, I agree. But it's interesting. You use the words relationships and trust, and so I've on LinkedIn recently run some polls. LinkedIn's full of polls these days. We're a poll nation. But we had some good engagement because one of them was about, okay, our relationship's important in sales. And there's a lot of people these days, a distinct minority still, but a number of people that think, relationships aren't important. And I think it's because they only can think about relationship in terms of being a friendship, but which is not the case in business.
Right.
But and then we ran one last week, or maybe the week before, about how important is trust in sales. And it was pretty universal that people believed that it was. I mean, the responses, I forget what the exact final number was, but wasn't unanimous though. And surprisingly, people, some very strongly saying, trust. You don't need trust. You don't need trust. You can make a decision without trust. And I thought, I wonder how they think that.
And do they think, does it depend on what they're buying?
Well, I mean, yeah, we're talking B2B more complex as opposed to transactional, right? Going to a retail store or just something transactional you might buy for your company. I mean,
Right.
do I need, well, even think about it. You could say sort of, okay, do I need trust to buy, pens or, a whiteboard or something? But the choice of who you choose to buy it from probably has some element of trust in there, right? Can they deliver
It
it on time?
does.
Will I get the
It
right
does.
product? Will
Yeah.
I support it? Yeah.
Right. I just don't think people are connecting the dots. I think if they thought about how they buy, they would probably realize that trust is a factor. There's still people out there who don't really care about the relationship. I do believe like they're going to make their decision. They're going to buy something. They don't need the relationship. They don't need the trust, but they also don't need someone trying to convince them of something because they're going to head into it knowing what they're going to buy, who they're going to buy it from, at what price. I mean, there's definitely those people,
Yeah.
but that is so not the norm.
Yeah, it's funny. One commenter on the poll we ran said, "Look, I don't need to trust the seller. I just need to believe that their product can do what they said it would do." And I'm like, thinking to myself, I didn't respond to it. It's like, isn't that trust? Isn't belief trust? So, anyway, yeah.
It could have something to do with definitions. Right?
Well, I think that's sometimes these arguments really get wrapped around the axle of definitions, and relationships are being one of them.
Yeah.
And so I say, fine. And like my new book I've got coming out early next year, I'm not sure I use the word relationships, just connection. You need to have a human connection with someone, and just sort of try to diffuse that argument before it even gets started. Because
Because it's coming.
Well, I think it's a way for people to sort of muddy the waters, right? Is to talk about that, and I find it curious the people that seem most uneasy about this idea of having the importance of a relationship or a connection with the buyer, importance of being personable, being likable. Yeah, I think there are people who are just sort of uncomfortable with the concepts in general. And there are these suite of things that require no effort on your part, yet
Right.
make a difference. And yeah, I've had long
Yeah, but
discussions.
Andy, for some people, it may require effort on their part. If
Possibly,
they're not,
yeah. Good point.
right? I mean, if they're not naturally sociable, if they're uncomfortable, if they're socially awkward or whatever, then yeah, that's going to take some work for them to engage in behaviors that are not comfortable for them.
Well, I think that's a key point, though, right? Is yeah, absolutely. You don't need to be an extrovert. You don't need to be. I'm more on the introvert side of the equation than the extrovert. Maybe in the middle somewhere, ambivert.
Yeah.
So it doesn't always come easy for me, and I remember early in my career just envying the people that just made it look so easy when they met someone and engaged in conversation with them. And I'm like, oh gosh, I wish I could be that person, right? Not all of them obviously were successful, but it was just that
They
thing.
just look like they were.
Well, yeah. But the point is, everybody has their own path.
Yes.
And I think this is the thing that gets lost today is, you listen to a podcast like this and you hear nearly 1,000 people come on the show and we talk about a variety of topics and everybody is pretty convinced about the rightness of their opinions. But the fact is that I believe very strongly that everybody succeeds in their own way, that the people who are most consistent in their success, and I'm not talking about the mythical top performers, because people that often get pointed to as top performers, people don't realize that they have ups and downs just like everybody else. Some years they're top performers, some years they're not. But the people who are consistently good is the ones that I think are the most valuable. They've come up with their own way. And I think this gets lost in the conversation. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I agree. Right. Because someone wants them to do it a certain way, wants them to behave in a certain way. And I completely agree with you. It is most resonant and most genuine when the person is themselves, when they figure out their own way of engaging, way of communicating with people. Definitely.
Yeah, and I sort of rail oftentimes against sort of the way sales is taught and trained oftentimes these days, because it's so much about compliance to a method and compliance to a process. And process is important, methods are important. You need to always be learning, but you need to take those things and meld it into what is you, right?
Yes.
How you sell, and resist the things that don't feel aligned with who you are, because there's a reason that salespeople are churning at really high rates in many companies and many sales jobs.
Yes.
Because they're being asked to do things that it's not the making a call. That's not what, that's uncomfortable for a lot of people, but you learn how to deal with that, or it's not the thing itself, it's how you do it. That's really, I think, creating a lot of stress, creating a lot of mental health issues in sales, because it's like, people think, well, there should be a way to make this work, and your way, boss, just isn't working.
Right. So the boss has to step off and realize, as long as they're getting results, the boss shouldn't care how they're doing it. Like, the goal is to get the results. As long as it's ethical and moral and legal, the boss shouldn't care if the salesperson is doing it in their own way and they're not getting results. Then it's the sales manager's responsibility to work with them and provide resources for them, but not try and pigeonhole them into a methodology that isn't natural and isn't going to work.
For that individual, yeah. I mean, I like, people ask me sort of what like I was a consultant and talked to a CEO. We'd have a great conversation. You get to the VP of sales, and it's always like, well, what methodology? Or, because we want to make sure we have a common language. And it's like, I'm a little bit contrarian. I'm not sure the common language is, you develop your common language within the company, not based on methodology, what things that you're doing. And don't handcuff your people with that.
And that's part of the struggle. I mean, for me, it sounds like it is for you too, that if you can't get the leadership, you can get the CEO to do, but if you can't get the sales manager to step off of this, we all march in the same way, it's difficult to get salespeople to be successful consistently, because you're asking them to engage in behaviors that are uncomfortable and unnatural, and so even when they try them, they don't do it well. Yeah. If they try it at all, they just
I mean, at some point, work. And user experience, this certainly I have, is you learn new things that push you outside your comfort zone. That's great.
Sure.
But in my career, I made a point of not doing the other things to the consternation of bosses often. But if you deliver,
right.
And I think this becomes the push-pull, as managers have to feel comfortable that if they give somebody some leeway, things may not be optimized for a month or two or 3. But
that's right.
Yeah, eventually someone, given the right support, it's not like sales is brain surgery or whatever, is reasonably intelligent people who are properly motivated and intrinsically motivated.
Right.
Can find a way to make it work and connect with other human beings, because the core skills that we all need are actually, I said, are innate behaviors to human. Right.
Well, that's a trust thing too, right? The sales manager has to be able to trust.
Well, they have a lot of pressures on them, obviously.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, and there's a number of businesses, industry segments and so on, where this is becoming kind of acute, because the change is needed, but the pressures and such from the markets and investors and so on are such that doing a down quarter doesn't really, to readjust things, doesn't really enter the equation.
I know, but do you think? I think that if they could adopt a practice and a policy of really supporting people in developing their own way, they might have, maybe 1 or 2 difficult quarters, but once people get going with a methodology that works for them and they're motivated, I don't know that they're going to have major downward swings It feels like, you have to take the pain now in order to be able to fix it later. And no one wants to take the time to be
Right.
in pain now.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, I think another part of this is, and this is just part of the equation that is difficult for companies, is that people come up to speed at different rates, whether it's a new hire or whether it's somebody that's brought into the company from a different environment. And there seems to be very little tolerance for deviation from that. So, hey, we've got a 90-day onboarding program. We expect you to be up to speed at the end of 90 days. It's like, seriously, really? Since when? If I had been judged by that measure in my first job, I would have had a series of first jobs because it took me much longer.
Yeah.
But then once I got it. Things happened
Right.
very quickly. Yeah, I remember there's something I read recently about and everybody listens to the show knows I'm a big soccer fan, but there's a professional soccer team in Europe that's done a study, and they found out that the average player requires 35 games at a high level of competition for them to be able to discern sort of whether they've got it or not, whether they're going to be able to do it or not. So because they find about that 35th game is it kicks into the player. They have that aha moment. Okay, now I understand my role. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's like, yeah, that's a lot, right? So we've imposed a number on sellers, 90 days, but I haven't seen a study that says, well, on average, this is how long it takes somebody to get it, not to be educated, not to be trained, but to have that aha moment that we all have had in sales.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. I'm speaking for myself, but I presume you as well.
Yes.
Where I just remember, so my first year, I mean, there have been multiple aha moments, but the first job in sales, yeah, it's like, I don't know, maybe 9 months in, I was like, oh, okay. Now I'm starting to get it. A couple successes, watching other people do things. It's just like, in every sort of job I've been in, if I'm leveling up into a new responsibility or so on, I had those moments, and it wasn't a fixed time.
No, it's not. And so then that feels arbitrary, which doesn't help either, because employees don't like arbitrary decisions. And if they feel like a line in the sand or a decision that's being made that impacts them is arbitrary, they're less connected to it. They're less motivated to reach it because, it's not tethered to anything meaningful.
Well, yeah, and this is the thing that always sort of gets me, because research is pretty clear. As you give people agency in the decisions they make, that they're more likely to make better decisions and more likely to follow up and follow through on the decisions they make. And this has been studied in the military. It's been discovered in senior living situations, or in terms of people making choices about where they live and taking their medications and so. I mean, it's just this is known, right? So you'd think in the sales world, as a sales manager, you don't say, well, yeah, I can force you to follow this process and this with it, or assuming you're experienced, right? This is is and you can make some choices. Yeah, I'm going to give you some leeway here, because I know that if you find the way that works for you, it's going to be killer, right? You're going to ring it. Yeah.
Right. So really, when you asked the question earlier about what does it take to change this, it takes a different mindset for leadership to open up the gates and allow people to be who they are in their most genuine form. So this is what's so hard for salespeople, is they feel this struggle. They know that they can do certain things. They know the impact they have, and they can't get anyone to listen to them and give them the opportunity to do it. So, the problem is not necessarily with the salespeople.
Oh, I 100% agree. I mean, it's so we're talking about sales management. They've got their own unique set of pressures. starting with the fact that, they haven't been well trained. They haven't been given the tools and the resources. They've been put into a job and assumptions made that they know how to do certain things, which is hugely unfair to them.
Yeah.
But it does also boil down to what you're talking about, is leadership. So increasingly what I'm dividing the world of sales management into two camps: sales leaders, sales bosses. Okay? You can be a boss or you can be a leader. And unfortunately, we have too many bosses, right?
Yes, we do. Yes.
So do what I want. Do it this way. The only thing that's important are really the metrics. You're not doing enough activity, as opposed to a leader who is, well, let me get to know you. What's most important for you? What's the most important thing that you want to accomplish in your career, in your life? And how can I help you get that? That's a leader. And this dichotomy plays out very strongly. And
every day.
I'm trying to make it a thing so that people, everybody listening, we're trying to make this a thing.
I'm with you.
Are you working for a sales boss or are you working for a sales leader?
Right.
And the leaders succeed consistently and manage to keep their people around. They have less churn of employees. They got people that perform at consistently higher levels. Again, not saying top producers. I mean, we've got the world. we survive and thrive on the backs of the people that do well, right? Do good.
Right.
Somehow good's become a pejorative, right? It's like, oh, you're just
it
good.
Is weird.
You're just good at what you do. As opposed to, well, you realize good means above average, right? Just FYI. So don't get me started on that.
Okay,
That's a whole other pet peeve I have.
Oh my gosh. But see, so then the goal is to re-educate the sales bosses.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Well, but
I have a whole chapter on sales management in the book.
You do. But it's such a disservice.
It's terrible
that companies do for their sales managers. And it has nothing to do with whether in my mind, whether you promoted your top performer or whatever, is just not enough's done for them. And so they don't know, right? And I'm not insulting anybody who's in sales.
No, I agree with you.
It's just not enough knowledge because you're not given it and we're not enabling it. We spend so much money on sales training and very little on sales management training.
Yes.
And I advocate, and people think I'm crazy when I say this, but I advocate that let's assume the number I've seen is $20 billion a year on sales training in the United States. Whether it's right or wrong, let's just take that number though.
Okay.
And the best I can tell is maybe 10% of that amount is spent on training sales managers.
Ooh.
And so what I'd advocate, and people think I'm kidding when I say this, but I'm actually not, is that we take the $18 billion we spend on sellers and spend it on sales managers. Because everything we've learned so far points to the fact that the single largest influence on individual sales performance is effective sales coaching and sales leadership from the frontline manager. So let's overinvest in that role. And the people they report to, let's overinvest in that. Because I've talked to some people that make a pretty eloquent point that says there's only so much training you can shove down a salesperson's throat, and at some point, the law of diminishing returns really starts coming in. So
I was just thinking that.
Let's invest that money in the people that really need it.
Exactly. It's like, so you educate the front line, but you don't educate the people who are supposed to be helping them and, training them and being a resource for them. It's almost wasted money. In a lot of cases, it is wasted money because, like I know the way that I train is about building relationships and doing all this stuff. Okay, well, if they're not going to be able to get support for that, the company just spent a whole bunch of money that they're going to get no return from because the salesperson is not going to be allowed to conduct themselves in that way.
Well, in some cases, or it's just that, coaching is such a big thing. in the last several years. I mean,
Yeah.
it's always been a big thing, but it's getting a lot of focus in the last several years because there's great tools like RingDNA's conversational AI product, where you can record calls. You actually could do real-time coaching in the moment with the platform.
Yeah.
Effective coaching makes a difference.
It
But
does.
the tools themselves won't make it happen. There has to be a culture of coaching, there has to be a mindset of coaching. There
Right.
has to be people that understand how to do it effectively.
Yes.
And yeah. Anyway, it's always been thus. Big companies, major companies, historically have done a better job of training management types. But I had a guest on my show last year, a gentleman named Peter Economy. He writes for Inc. magazine and wrote a book about management, first-time managers, not specifically sales, but we extrapolated into sales. But he had found a study, and I'll ask you the question. So, on average, how old is a manager the first time they receive leadership training?
50.
No, it's a little better than that, but yeah, it's like 42 or 43, right? So, yeah, I got promoted. My first management job, I was 23.
Yeah, me too.
Leading a sales team, and it's like I got 2 weeks of training that's really pretty forgettable, and that was it. Because after that, I worked in a number of tech startups throughout the years, and not one iota of training. And that continues today, right? I mean, they may bring somebody in, spend a day, and then everybody forgets it. But I mean, we just don't invest in those people. So again, when I draw the distinction between bosses and sales leaders, it's not a function of them as humans. It's as how are we educating them?
So do you think part of the problem is we're having this conversation? I keep thinking that part of the problem is that the top leadership, if they have no sales experience in their life, and so they don't necessarily have an understanding of what it means to be a salesperson, what it's like to be a salesperson, and all of that, and they're the ones making the decision about what their expectations are of the sales manager. Can that be a place where there's a disconnect with, because then the sales manager, as you said, the sales manager's got a lot of pressure on them because, they're getting edicts that aren't necessarily attached to what the reality of a good sales engagement would be.
Well, to some degree, I think that's true. I think that I believe that it starts with this assumption that if we promote somebody into a role, they must have the capabilities to do that role.
Didn't we read that book in the 80s? Don't we know that's not true?
Yeah, and that's just not the case. And let's take a very real example in sales. Sales, we're in a performance business, and there is a growing body of science about performance improvement, and several dimensions to it. No sales managers trained in performance improvement science. No sales director is. No VP of sales is. But you can't go to a professional sports team and find that they have nobody there that knows anything about performance improvement. Actually, they probably have a sports scientist on their staff who was trained, maybe has an advanced degree in performance improvement. So why do they and we don't? Yet we're a sports. We're a business sport, sales.
Yeah.
I have posted a post on LinkedIn this week. A post that's got a fair amount of engagement about. I'm a fan of the show Billions because I don't know if you've seen it, but about a hedge fund, and one of the key employees of the hedge fund is the staff psychiatrist and the staff therapist. And I believe that, if you have a sales team with more than 50, maybe 100, you should have a staff psychologist. You should have a performance psychologist, if not on staff, on retainer, that people can easily access. Yeah. Oh, heaven forbid. I've had people comment on the post, I tried to sell this internally and they laughed at me, right? Yeah.
It's because they don't understand what is involved in psychologically in being a salesperson.
Right, but you can't go to a professional sports team, which is a professional, performance-based profession. You can't go to one that doesn't have a psychologist, if not on staff, on immediate retainer. I mean, most of them have them on staff, sports psychologists. Professional golfers, keep them on retainer.
Absolutely.
Well, there's a reason for that. And we're no different. We put sellers into a situation where they're there on their own. They're on the island. They have to perform. And they're dealing with the stresses of everyday life and stress of performing and maybe just the mindset's not right. Hey, why don't we do that?
Yeah.
Well, again, these people said the people at the top would say, just hire another salesperson. I can't justify the ROI. It's like, are you kidding? I mean, you should probably very easily be able to justify the ROI, and it should be intuitively obvious to you that this is what you need to do. But we're still stuck in this sort of suck it up type era, right?
Because we're still stuck in this old paradigm of this is what it means to be a salesperson. Look at car salesmen. They haven't changed, and everybody hates buying a car. So what ends up happening? We end up with online. Carvana comes out and says, okay, you don't have to deal with a salesperson. Just go ahead and do it on your own, and we'll be there to help you when you need it. And the dealership still can't figure that out?
Well, so I'm going to counter that argument, though, because, the two best sales experiences I've had in the last 2-3 years are buying cars. And
really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot of people. So my fear is that, as someone who spent most of my career in tech, is that what's going to happen in 10 years from now, when you look at popular culture, TV, movies, when they portray sort of the sleazy salesperson, it's no longer going to be a car salesperson. It's going to be a software salesperson.
Oh, wow. Really? Do you really think so? Ooh.
My experience with car sales, buying a car, and I've informally asked a number of people I know. And I did some of it online, but in terms of sort of the pre-work and so on. But it's very clear with the salesperson what I wanted, not in terms of model, but what I wanted the experience to be. And he made it happen, right? Last time I went in, I'd bought a car from this guy before, and because he had done a great job, or leased a car from him, and so my lease was up, I was going to get a new one. And we'd been talking. I said, well, I think I want to do, the same one again, or something similar. He said, great. I said, here's the thing. We want to take care of this. I don't want to spend more than an hour in the dealership. I want to be done.
Yeah.
He says, okay, I think I can do that. Everything prepared ahead of time. Papers easily signed. You go to the finance department. He had wired or greased the skids there, so they didn't. Because I said I'm not going to buy any of the upgrades. I didn't last time. Great. Yeah. So, it's a great experience from a customer perspective.
The last time when I bought my car, I had the same. I told the gal, it was a woman, and I said to her, listen, this is where I'm at. This is what's going on. She heard everything I said. She responded appropriately. It was a great experience with her. And then when we went into when they were figuring out, the numbers, I had to check them a couple times. And then when we went into the finance office, it was that pushy. The guy even said to me, what do you mean you're not going to get this? It was like insulting. It was like, no, but thanks. Right. Keep it up. And I won't even buy the car. So.
Right. So I was just a shout out to the people who sell cars.
Yeah.
I've had great experiences. I've had some bad experiences, but most of the bad experiences actually ended up being in the finance office, not with the seller, not with the person on the floor.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So anyway, try to work on that. So, well, last thing, because we're starting to get a little bit toward the end, but is I agree with you right about in the book that sales should be fun, right? This is, again, rarely see this written about or talked about. I mean, I've been in it forever, and the only reason was because it's been fun, and I've wanted it to be fun. I've done the things to try to make it fun
Yeah.
for myself and others. I mean, it doesn't mean we haven't had
Yeah.
pressure-filled moments and drama and so on. But to your point, you write about the book is you learn something new every time you meet a new prospect, which I'm an insatiably curious person. I read voraciously. I think that's the thing that sort of more than anything kept me in sales is meeting people that are doing interesting things that I could learn something about.
Right. Right. People tend to want to do things that are fun. So that's the other part of that. Yes, it should be fun and people are more likely to do it and go through the steps. But I'm with you. This is why I think curiosity is so critically important in sales, right? You just approach everything with curiosity because then you're present and you're learning and you're connecting or not.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Get into the right relationships.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you also talk about that too, which is you don't have to sell to everybody.
Right. Tricky, isn't it?
Well, but it's sometimes a mystery when you tell people that. Yeah, in my first book, I wrote about it is that you really need to gave the sort of the metaphor is that you're like the bouncer at the head of the velvet rope, and you make a decision whether someone gets into the club or not.
That's right. That's right. And not only are you allowed to, but it's your obligation to do it to your other customers, to your staff, to your coworkers, to everybody. It's an obligation, I think, to do that because it keeps you out of those client relationships where you don't make any money, no one's happy, no one's enjoying themselves, right? Including the customer, and it just becomes a lot of work.
Well, let me ask you a hypothetical because I've been asked this before. Is okay, you develop a lead, and it looks like a pretty decent opportunity. Superficially, they seem like a match. But they're just horrible people.
Yeah.
So what do you do? I think for a lot of sellers, that's a really hard decision. And
I do too.
Yeah, I think we've all had these, right? I remember one client had a woman running this company, very successful. When during the first half of the sales process, learning a ton. That's a very successful entrepreneur and so on. But it was like a flip switch, or switch flipped, excuse me. And suddenly it just got really dark. and it was one of these things where like, oh gosh, I think if we end up doing a deal with her, she's going to find a way to sue us, right? It just sort of seemed that type of person. And ironically, she ended up doing it and got tossed out because she had no grounds. But afterwards, I was telling myself, I should have just said no. But at the time, I wanted the business.
I know. So it's such a great question because we want the revenue. We need the revenue. So we convince ourselves, talk about convincing, we convince ourselves that we'll be able to handle it, or it really won't be bad, or we're misreading, or we'll make sure that, we put systems in place to prevent whatever. And really, so what I say is, okay, yes, you need revenue, but what you really need is profit. And those pieces of business are not profitable in the long run because they end up eating up all of your resources and keep you away from bringing in other business that is profitable. So that business actually hurts your bottom line. It doesn't help it. And I think that can help people say, okay, you know what, I need to walk away from that.
Yeah, I think it's a great perspective. That's really, there's no metric for that. It's just your gut feel.
Yeah. But you should go with it.
Yeah, well, that's right. There's a lot to be said for gut feel, absolutely. Because you're using it on all various parts of your selling process already, whether you're conscious of it or not. But yeah, that is one that, and also getting back to the topic of fun is, if it's no longer fun dealing with them, even while you're selling to them, make sure you listen to your gut on that as well, because not all money is equal.
No.
And some money comes with a high price. And you've experienced it. I've experienced it. That was just one instance. I just remember at the time we had a policy, the 4-hour response time on service calls. And if this woman who was CEO of this pretty good sized company, but she was personally invested in this, would call me and say, we just put in a service call. I said, oh, great. Well, make sure they're right. All right. If they're not here in 4 hours, we're suing you. This is a typical conversation. If they're not here in 4 hours, we're suing you. And finally, after a few months of that, I responded badly, I think, but I told her to get a number and stand in line. So when she did that, and hung up on her. Yeah.
Yes, that is responding badly, but still. You're allowed to fire a client.
She stopped threatening me after that, at least. That was good.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
I'll bet. Yeah. Well, because she wasn't getting away with it at that point.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I'd been aiding and abetting unknowingly.
Yeah, right. She's playing the game.
I hadn't had kids yet, so I wasn't aware of the lessons that were being played, or the games that were being played. So I got smarter over time.
Right. That is funny how that happens, isn't it?
Yeah. What parenting teaches you about customer relationship management.
Exactly. That's right.
Quite a bit, actually, yes.
Yeah. And employees. It teaches you a lot about a lot of things.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. A different conversation to go with that.
Yes.
All right. Well, Diane, we're running out of time, but it's been a pleasure to talk with you. And if people want to learn more about your book and connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
I would say going to my website, helbigenterprises.com. They can download a free chapter of the book. They can see all the stuff that's going on. They can connect with me through my social platforms there and all that fun stuff, and welcome conversations with anyone who might have questions about how to sell them.
Good. Well, I recommend people do that. And again, the title of your book was Succeed Without Selling. The more you think about selling, the less you will sell. And great title, by the way. So
thank you.
Diane, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. As always, I'm so grateful for your support of the show. And I want to thank my guest, Diane Helbig, for sharing her insights with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can do all that on your phone in less than a minute as soon as we finish up here. So thank you for your help. And thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.